Glad to join you all for this PCG meeting. Let's have fun.
I should have started with Representative Alcon. I just realized, but he doesn't have a photo on the screen. So, and Representative Armstrong after that. So, Representative Alcon, you want to say hello?
I'm here, Madam Chair. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm in the great village of Milan, looking down on all of you.
Great. Thanks. Welcome. All right.
Yes, it is.
Representative Armstrong? You're muted.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
There we go. Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Debbie Armstrong, and I represent District 17 in the middle of the North Valley of Albuquerque, and looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And my alphabetical list is just coming off my head by whom I see here on the phone. Representative Bash.
Yes, hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Bash, and I represent House District 68 in the northwest corner of Albuquerque.
Welcome. Glad to have you. Representative Fajardo, you're joining us today?
I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I've been trying to get on this committee, so I'm sneaking in so I can hear everything that's going on. And so I was on the last one as well. I really enjoyed the conversation that's been going on. So thank you for allowing me to share with you guys.
Great. Representative Maestas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Antonio Maestas, House District 16 from Albuquerque's West Mesa. Great agenda, Madam Chair. I look forward to the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Martinez. You're muted. Senator, you need to unmute yourself. We don't have the power to unmute ourselves, do we, Aaron?
Is that it?
Yay, we got you. Okay.
I was looking for the little unmute button here on the bottom, and it's not chilly on the side. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you guys. Okay, I'm Senator Richard Martinez. I represent District 5, which is portions of Rio Arriba, Los Alamos, northern Santa Fe County, and a small portion of Sandoval County. And it's good to see everyone.
Good to see you too. Senator Rue, I know you were on, but you're not on my screen now. Oh, there you are. There you are. Say hello. You're actually muted too, Senator.
I'm sorry, who were you asking for?
I'm asking for you to introduce yourself.
I'm so sorry, I was multitasking here. Madam Chairwoman, this is Senator Sandra Rue. My district is District 23, and I'm located in the west quadrant of Albuquerque. Good to see everybody. Thank you.
Good. And Representative Roybal Caballero.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee and viewing audience. My name is Patricia Roybal Caballero, and I represent House District 13, which is the far southwest quadrant of Albuquerque. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. Representative Ream.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm State Representative Bill Ream, District 31, the far northeast heights of Albuquerque. Thank you.
Senator Stewart.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm State Senator Mimi Stewart, District 17, and includes the International District and the East Gateway area of Albuquerque. And thank you for putting together the agenda today. I'm also excited about it.
Thank you. And I see I've actually missed someone alphabetically. We have a new representative, Representative Lujan.
Good morning, committee. This is Representative Tara Lujan, House District 48, Santa Fe County. Very happy to be here today, and thank you for the agenda. It looks wonderful, so I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to the legislature. Representative Lujan has been appointed and then actually officially now is holding the seat that Linda Trujillo held. For those of you who aren't, I know we don't always know what the district numbers are.
District 48,
So,
yes, yeah.
yes, but when you say that, we just don't automatically picture your district. So trying to see if anybody else is on who has not introduced himself or herself. Oh, Senator Cervantes is here, the co-chair. Good morning. Senator, do you want to say hello? Well, he's still muted, so I'll give him a minute here. Let me just tell everyone, and I'm probably going to repeat this a few times today, you know, we're going from a typical interim calendar of about 14 to 15 meetings to 5. And so it is very stressful and requires a lot of juggling to get everything in. When I looked at this agenda, and I know I have a large part in saying, oh, we have to do all of these things, this is a lot. And I'm afraid that we won't get as much depth as we would like in some of the, particularly this afternoon when we're doing corrections and some of those issues. We are going to try to do public comment as close to the topic as possible so that we don't just wait till the end of the day. And we have, I did ask for Elizabeth Johnson, our staff attorney, who has taken over ably from Mark Peralta Silva. We were sorry to see him go to the appellate office of the public defender, but Elizabeth sent you a link about an article that was generated after the subcommittee meeting recently that Senator Ryu and Representative Maestas co-chair about the independent oversight of corrections. If you got a chance to read that, I'm happy about that. I think I see Mr. Baca from the AG's office on our screen now too. Is there anyone who would like to say anything before we go ahead? And we'll just begin a little early on your presentation. The first item on the agenda is law enforcement use of force. This presentation, though, is based on legislation, and Senator Cedillo Lopez and Representative Roybal Caballero, you're welcome to explain that to the group. Are you ready to go? Make yourself heard.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. So this started, just to give you a little history, and I also want to give a little bit of background. My father was an undersheriff in Valencia County. I have cousins who are part of APD. I have cousins who are, very proud to be in sheriff's departments around the state. So I have been accused, this bill, I don't even understand why that would be, of being anti-police, and I am not. I view this bill as very supportive of the police. What this bill is about is transparency, timeliness, and accountability. And so what it did, and to give you the history, is a year and 2 months ago, Alicia Lucero, who was a young woman, received 21 bullets in her body after her family called on a mental health call. And that incident and community members spoke to me about that incident and about other incidents. And what struck me was the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability, and the lack of timeliness. It's a year and 2 months later, and there still has not been any statement about that shooting. Nothing. Absolutely nothing, except a little statement from the police about their version of what happened. And it's a very abbreviated version of what happened, and a lot of lack of clarity. And of course, there was no lapel cameras. And so I'm very, very happy that the legislation we passed will have lapel cameras. And these officers now will have, there'll be a little bit more accountability and transparency because of the lapel cameras. But this is about holding those police officers or any police officer who there is an allegation of excessive use of force that results in great bodily harm or death. And what it does is it requires almost immediately for the police to notify the district attorney's office and the district attorney's office to notify both the attorney general's office and the governor's office about the use of force, the alleged excessive use of force. That decision of whether it's excessive, of course, will be made in the process. And then what the bill does is it allows the option of the local district attorneys to let the attorney general take over. But if not, they work on the case together. And the reason I think that's so important is because there should be two sets of eyes. One of the things, I taught ethics for many years at the law school, and one of the things I always said is, if you're in an ethical dilemma, don't decide it by yourself, because you know that you have most people know that they have a good heart and good intentions, so they don't resolve it appropriately. And so it's always good to consult with someone else. And I believe that local district attorney's office almost have an inherent conflict of interest when they're dealing with the local police departments and the local sheriff's office, because they work so closely together. And that's why I think it's really important that the attorney general's office be involved very, very early on. It requires an independent investigation. And then after that, what I think is very, very important for transparency is it requires the prosecuting authority, whether it's the district attorney or the attorney general's office or both, to make quarterly reports on what is happening in the case. And then if there is a decision not to prosecute, they need to do a final detailed report citing the relevant evidence. And this is after they are closing the case. One of the things that the Attorney General's office told me when we were negotiating is that sometimes these cases take a long time. And I said, well, great, then just keep doing the quarterly reports. But at least the family and the public will know what is the status of the investigation. But at some point, a decision needs to be made whether the use of force was excessive or not. And that not part is very important, because police officers also have this investigation hanging over their head. And so it's very important, if the use of force was justified, that there be a statement about why it was justified. And if it was not justified, that there be accountability. And I think that this is a small step in addressing what I perceive as a problem, is the lack of accountability, the lack of transparency, and the lack of timeliness in these investigations, because I don't think they're going to want to do a quarterly report forever. They're going to want to tie it up and make a decision at some point. And I think that's very important. If that had happened in Alicia Lucero's case, we would know what was going on. But right now, and I believe you're going to hear from her sister, Elaine, they just see the police officers that shot her sister walking around, no accountability, no consequences, and no statement that the shooting was appropriate or not appropriate. And so with that, I'm happy to stand for questions. As I said, I negotiated this bill with the Attorney General's office, primarily with who is now District Judge Clara Moran. She is no longer at the office; she's now a district judge. So I will be talking, as we work toward a final draft of this bill, I will be working with their office. But this is sort of where the bill was as we went into special session.
And Senator, let me say that for those of you who would like to look at the legislation that was proposed during this special session, it was Senate Bill 17, and I think it was House Bill, I'm not remembering.
House Bill 7.
House Bill 7, House Bill 7 and Senate Bill 17, and those were identical. If it's helpful for you to look at those at the time. I see we've been joined by a few more people. Let me ask Representative Roybal Caballero if she would like to speak, and then I will go to your other, the public members who wanted to talk about your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Senator Cedillo Lopez for giving a great overview. I would like to just mention real briefly, I got a message from one of the community members that they're having trouble logging in, and that's hoping the staff would be able to help Elaine Maestas while I'm speaking briefly. Thank you again. Myself and a number of community members have been in pursuit of this legislation for many years, actually since I got elected in 2012, and my first session was 2013. There have been several other attempts prior to our attempt, and I continue on this path in response and in coordination and in advocacy with community members. If you recall, Madam Chair, members of the committee and audience, Albuquerque experienced a number of shootings. I think at one time we made national headlines for the number of what we believe were excessive use of force shootings and very negligent, in our opinion, deaths. And so we have continued to pursue this, and we've worked very diligently throughout the years with the Attorney General's office. And I want to just say thank you to the Attorney General's office for moving and helping us move this bill forward, not just this bill, but in continuing to improve the language and the approaches. And I know that we stayed back a few years and did not pursue this type of legislation in order to be able to give the Attorney General's office the ability to work with the district attorneys throughout the state to try to come up with ways in which we could mitigate the excessive force that we were seeing, which at that time also included the city of Las Cruces, Doña Ana, and other parts of the state. So we withdrew pursuit of this type of legislation for a few years, and I'm happy that we are pursuing it again, this time together with Senator Cedillo Lopez and others, and Madam Chair. And we've been seeing a trend that instead of reducing the use of excessive force, we're continuing to see the use of excessive force. And so as such, I think this bill is very timely. I think it addresses a number of issues. This bill, if you notice, was also introduced with institutional racism and a number of other bills that we felt were very aligned with what was occurring, not just on the national level, but with around our state. So I'm going to defer a lot of what I wanted to say to time put in for the questions and answers, and I'll be here to support the questions and answers in however way. I want to also make clear that I have personal families, members that have been shot and killed due to a number of reasons, and the failure of pursuing the guilty parties on behalf by the district attorneys because of the conflict of interest that Senator Cedillo Lopez has mentioned. And I too come from a strong law enforcement and military background. So this is in no way an attempt to attack law enforcement. It is a way in which we believe that we can hold law enforcement accountable through transparency and timely responses, which I believe this bill does. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Cedillo Lopez, and I look forward to the presentations by the community members. I do stand in full alignment, I will say this, with the proposition and the recommendations that are being made by and will be made by Elaine Maestas, and I'm hoping that we can work through the recommendations in the continued language of the bill. Thank you. Madam Chair, we can't hear you. I think you need to unmute.
I forgot to do that. Mr. Baca, I wonder if you would like to comment now, and then we have a couple of folks who are actually part of the presentation who are community members, but let me go ahead. And I don't know if you heard the senator say, she tried to explain that you weren't the one with whom she had been working on this. So I hope you're ready to talk about it from the Attorney General's perspective at this point. Thank you.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. And my name is Matt Baca. I'm Chief Counsel for the Attorney General. Throughout the drafting of the bill during the special session, I definitely worked quite closely with then Chief Deputy Clara Moran. So, I'm happy to give you all some comments on the experience of the Attorney General's office in bringing some of these use of force prosecutions and sort of what that has looked like. Also happy to stand for questions about the proposed legislation. Madam Chair, really sort of here at your disposal, so I'll take your cue in terms of what you'd like to hear today.
Okay, let me check and see who else we have here from the public.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, this is Erin. Elaine Maestas just joined via phone.
Okay, great.
I can unmute her if that's all right with you.
All right, go ahead.
Elaine, you're unmuted.
Oh, hi. Thank you all for having me today. So as many of you know, I am the sister of Alicia Lucero. She was the young lady that was killed last July by BCSO after a call for help. The purpose of me speaking today is to really urge each and every one of you to see the importance in a bill like this bill and why it is so desperately needed. Our family has been waiting for over a year now for answers and about what happened to Alicia and getting some accountability and transparency. And I can tell you that there is no way that a family can begin to heal when you are waiting and hoping for some sort of accountability. The current process is 100% untransparent and broken. As if it isn't hard enough to deal with losing your loved one, you're now stuck in this limbo that becomes overwhelming at times. For my family, it's too late to avoid this broken process, but we can change it for other families. And I have set out to change what led to Alicia's death so that no family has to endure getting that call that we got and losing a part of yourself that was 100% avoidable. I have also set out to change the broken processes that are in place that I have come across, and this bill addresses one of those areas. If I could request a few changes be made to it, that would be great. One of the changes I would like to request is I know that our family feels that we were robbed of our only chance in getting any real answers. When BCSO was allowed to lead the investigation into Alicia's death. For me, that doesn't make sense that this is even allowed, that an agency can investigate themselves. And we feel that it's a huge injustice to the families that are going through the loss. So that's one of the main areas that we would like to see, added into this bill is is just to, I don't know how you guys would go about that, but change that. It shouldn't be allowed. It doesn't make sense to me. And, you know, there is another area where toxicology testing, for me, anytime that there is a use of force situation resulting in death, or just use of force situation in general, it should be mandatory that a toxicology test is performed on the officer or deputy involved to make sure that they were fully competent at the time of the incident. And yeah, that would be my recommendation. And thank you all for having me. I'm sorry that I'm a little choked up.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I really appreciate it. And I hope that we can look at your suggestions, and I'm really glad the Attorney General's office is hearing this as well. Representative Caballero, was there someone else who was presenting?
Yes, Madam Chair. I want to, before we go on, I just want to say thank you to Elaine. I know it's very heart-wrenching to have to speak about this each and every time, but the contribution that she and others are making is incredibly important for us to be able to improve the processes in place. We want to make sure, Madam Chair, that we don't in any way interfere with the job of the overall law enforcement and the good law enforcement people we have at the forefront. I believe I received word that Andres Valdez has signed on, but I don't know. I guess Aaron can verify that. And that would be the other person.
Yes, he's on.
Just a moment. Can you hear me? I'm on the phone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm on the phone.
Yes, Mr. Valdez. Go ahead, Mr. Valdez.
Yes, can you hear me? I'm on the phone.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for having me. I've been a political activist for many, many years, and have particularly been working on police oversight and seeking justice for 30 years. Since 1989, we have been tracking police shootings and police beatings, and the condoning of these events. And people might think, well, this guy is anti-police, but I really am not. I have a lot of police officers that are friends. Plus, it's important to be totally impartial about these matters and call things how they are. So I'd like to kind of, if the committee permits me, to do like a little analysis of why police brutality happens, why there's police shootings. And to make a long story short, but I do want to go into some detail, but is that it happens because police officers, by law, are allowed to do this. People say, well, nobody's above the law, but the way the laws are set up and the way rules are set up is they basically are placed above the law. And I'd like to bring out a point where there's really three basic layers of protection where police officers are not prosecuted for crimes they do like normal citizens. And that's not to say that, I mean, we have a lot of good police officers, and thank God for the police departments that we have and the good work they do. And I must add at this point that I disagree with some of the BLM proposals to defund the police, to do away with police. And it's important to say that the reason these things have occurred is because the police brutality has been condoned by pretty much all elected officials up until now. People are starting to see that these things are reality through video cameras. But basically, if you break down what happens when a police officer commits a an injustice, something that's wrong. And the first thing is he's protected by his fellow officers. I'm sure all of you have heard of the term the blue code of silence. Second, he's protected by his lieutenants, his sergeants, his captains, and then later on the commanders, and then the police chief. As you might know, the police chief from Albuquerque right now is gone, and if you read the details in the Albuquerque Journal, you'll find out that he just didn't resign, that he was actually, that Mayor Tim Keller wanted him to go because police reforms were not being done fast enough, but in the underlying reason is there's still a lot of stuff going on with commanders and commanders basically not wanting to, they're like basically what I understand, anti-consent decree by some of the amici, people that have become part of the consent decree case. Point is that they're protected all the way up in the police department. Then they're protected by district attorneys. If you look at the history of district attorneys have, for years and years, not prosecuted cops on police shootings and much less on excessive use of force. Now, and so that happens, and then the Attorney General has also sort of like been part of this condoning process, because attorney generals only seem to respond when it's a high-level case, and just recently that these cases have become public news, has the Attorney General responded. If you look also at Attorney General's history, rarely do they take on cases of police shootings and excessive use of force. I'm glad it's starting to happen now. However, having said all of this, we've looked into how can we start to begin to resolve police brutality, and the thing is that police officers need to be held accountable like any citizen when they commit crimes. Now, there was a bill drafted this regular session 2020, and it was House Bill, excuse me, that was Senate Bill 100, and also we had a House bill that was a duplicate of that carried by Representative Patricia Roybal Caballero. Now that bill had very important language that this bill does not have. That bill called for open public preliminary hearings, open to the public. That is so important because of the lack of distrust that we have in how cases are prosecuted. This bill that we're looking at here doesn't have what Senate Bill 100 has. Senate Bill 100 worked it out to where a judge would determine probable cause, not an AG, not a DA, and for them to determine, well, there's not enough evidence to determine whether this cause is a probable cause. It should be up to a judge. We no longer really trust the whole system, so it would behoove us to have an open public preliminary hearing in front of a judge where a judge determines probable cause, not a DA and not an AG that should decide, well, I don't think this case should be heard, and so because things have happened where we just don't trust them anymore. If you recall the whole history of Kerry Brandenburg,
Mr. Valdez?
Yes.
Hold on just a minute. Yes, this is the chair. I'd like you to try to shorten this up and so that we can move to reactions from the Attorney General and then questions from the committee.
Okay, let me see if I can make a couple of points and I should be done.
Okay.
And one, that the history of Kerry Brandenburg as an Attorney General, it was 16 years history of Carrie Brandenburg as a district attorney. I apologize. And that was 16 years, proved through an IPRA that she was justifying every single police shooting, basically through a closed grand jury process, which is what we don't want. That's why we want open public preliminary hearings. And these shootings were being justified basically by not proposing both sides of the story or both sides of the law. And so that if you look at the law, that's tampering with evidence. And so there was like 16 years of doing that. That was presented to our current Attorney General for review. And he didn't even as much as bat an eye or look at the case or even consider it seriously. So that really tells us that we really need open public preliminary hearings. And also, I just want to add, this is my last point, that our governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, really should answer to a bill that she co-sponsored when she was Congresswoman, H.R. 429. She proposes all the right things, and it's a very good bill. It's a very good thing for us to follow, and that's our governor, our leader, telling us this is what needs to be done. She proposes open public preliminary hearings. She proposes independent investigators and prosecutors. Last thing I'd like to say is there's just not enough time to say what needs to be said. There's not enough time right now to present the evidence and information that I have to convince you that we really do need these open public preliminary hearings, and a judge should determine probable cause. And I'm going to take as much time as I possibly, or I'm going to do the best I can to contact each and every single one of you to provide you with the information I have. And I hope that you facilitate this process. If you can somehow get in touch with me, because I don't know your phone numbers or contact information, and it's not available at the legislature at the legislative capitol, because they have your information for when you get in office and not your personal phone numbers, which is what I need.
Mr. Valdez, the best thing to do is to email us. And all of those, every one of us has email that's posted on the website. I want to go to committee
Let
members.
me just say, can I just say that the emails are like when you're in session, but not when you, I guess, are in the interim, right?
Well, you might have to be persistent in some cases, but so we want to go now to members of the committee, and I'm looking to see if I have anyone. I don't see any hands raised, so if you want to indicate to me your desire to speak, either, you have to go to the list of participants. Do I have somebody?
Maestas, I have a few questions.
Yes, thank you. Representative Maestas.
Let me just get set up here. Thank you. I need to plug in my computer so it doesn't turn off. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Cedillo Lopez, Representative Royval Caballero, Mr. Valdez, Ms. Maestas. Anyway, I want to thank you for bringing this forward. It's so very, very important. I think what's unfortunate is there's not good stats kept on police shootings nationally, and I don't believe they're very good locally, but I do recall about 6-7 years ago, New Mexico led the nation in police officer shootings. So there is something to be said for that. And for those of us who live in Albuquerque, our hometown police department had some serious cultural issues, and it was determined by the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice that APD had a pattern and practice of excessive force as it related to tasering and shootings. And so we're dealing with that. here in Albuquerque. So a lot of these incidences, you're right, they were reviewed by law enforcement officials, and those law enforcement officials chose not to pursue anything. I recall me and Paul Simonson of the ACLU met with local FBI agents, and they said, well, we reviewed all these shootings and none of them rise to the level of wrongdoing. And then when the DOJ findings letter came out, it was determined that close to 50% of them were in fact wrongdoing. And in my opinion, a couple of those, maybe more, were criminal. So Professor, Madam Chair, Professor, it's the prosecutor's duty to bring forth allegations of criminal activity. It's the prosecutor's decision to choose whether to go to grand jury or not, based on their opinion on probable cause. And even some prosecutors will say, well, I could probably get probable cause, but I can't win beyond a reasonable doubt, and I'm not going to pursue this particular case. Why? You're changing that a little bit. Talk a little bit about that and why that's necessary in this instance.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Madam Chair, may I answer? I'm not yeah.
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator Cedillo.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you know, the point that you made about record keeping, Madam Chair, is very important. That's one of the reasons that an immediate report of the death or great bodily harm must be made both to the Attorney General's office. Well, I guess it's 24 hours and then 48 hours, but to the Attorney General's office and then also to the Governor's office to help us with the federal requirement that these cases be reported. Because apparently that process, you know, kind of, there's no law requiring that report, and that's how sometimes some of these issues don't get reported to the federal government. And then the second point you made about this bill requires that if the prosecutor, which will be either the Attorney General's office or a team of the Attorney General's office and the local DA, depending on whether the local DA stepped it back or not, it requires that they take it to preliminary hearing, but it doesn't take away their prosecutorial discretion. And that's the point of contention with Mr. Valdez. Mr. Valdez wants every time there is a shooting or great bodily harm to a community member for there to be automatically a preliminary hearing. And we cannot take away prosecutorial discretion in that regard. But once the prosecutor decides to take it forward, it must be through an open preliminary hearing and not through the grand jury process. And that's to accommodate the issue of transparency. And that is a profound change. As Mr. Valdez says, when you have these cases go in the secret grand jury process, it does not initiate trust in the public when they decide not to go forward with the case. In the preliminary hearing, that decision will be made by a judge, and all of the public will know what evidence was presented in the preliminary hearing. And I think that will really go a long way toward transparency.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Cedillo Lopez. And you made an excellent point at the beginning of your comments that, 9 times out of 10, that these officers want closure. They do not want this dark cloud hanging over their head. They want to be absolved or at least, move on from this process. So that took years in Albuquerque. We had, when the local DA began his term, he had a huge backlog of officer-involved shootings and has cleared out, I believe, most of them, if not all of them, to the benefit of the officers involved. That's just a horrible stressor to go through that for 3 months or 6 months, much less 3 or 4 years. That uncertainty in your career and your liberty. So that's important as well. And I think a lot of officers would embrace that procedural aspect of it. The officer shoots someone, it's different than if anybody else shoots someone. Officers are trained to solicit information from people. Officers are allowed to lie, to trick people into giving them information. Officers, can ask leading questions, open questions. threaten people, they can whatever to get the, hopefully the truth, but to get a confession to bolster the prosecutorial ability to hold that person accountable. But cops, however, after officers shoot someone, officers will not ask them any questions at the scene. They will not ask them, how you doing? They will all clam up. If you watch the recent video, I believe, of the shooting in back east where the kid was running around the corner and the officer shot him, none of the fellow officers asked him any questions about his health. In fact, they are not allowed, not only in the contract, not only in the police union contract, but in state law.
Representative Maestas, you cut out for a moment, and I didn't hear. What question they weren't allowed to ask or didn't ask.
Thank you. Any questions, Madam Chair, Senator, Representative? Any questions? In fact, they have, I believe it's 48 hours before you can even interview them. And the state is only allowed to interview them, or not even the state, this isn't a criminal proceeding, but an HR thing, whether they're to be fired or not. They're not only protected by the police contracts, but they're protected in state statute. And it's so detailed in state statute that they're only allowed 2 questioners at a time, an hour at a time, and 2 hours max. And they can ask for a bathroom break at any time. That's state law. So it's very, very difficult to get to the bottom of some of these shootings until that aspect of state law is removed, and they're treated like any other government worker, that if you make a mistake, your boss asks you what the heck happened. And obviously, if there's criminal liability, they can plead the fifth. That never goes away. But my point is, Madam Chair, Senator, Representative, is that in certain towns, certain cities, when there's a police-involved shooting, the town is up in arms. For example, Seattle's my second home. When there's a police shooting in Seattle, the newspapers are asking for questions. The TV stations are, wondering what happened. The business community is like, oh my goodness, what's happening to our fine city? It is not normal for a government official to shoot a citizen, and it's sad all the way around. And so we have to, in New Mexico, accept the fact that it's not normal, that it shouldn't happen as often as it does, and that folks need to be held accountable either in their job, civilly liable, or those times when it's when there's criminal liability where the shooting was not justified. So anyway, thanks for bringing this forward. Look forward, and I want to thank the AG for working on this bill. It is difficult, Madam Chair, for the local DA to be involved. And for example, when Kerry Brandenburg did finally charge the 2 officers that killed the guy in the East Mountains, the entire APD as an agency treated the DA's office, a whole other agency, differently soon after that. It was bad. And so it's good that the local DA doesn't get involved in these things because the officers have a lot of power. They're unified, and they're susceptible to what's called the blue flu, which is a term back east in which police officers don't go on strike. They just do less of what they're supposed to be doing, or they act in a way that they're not supposed to act as an organized unit. But anyway, I can go on and on. Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator C. Lopez, Representative Roybal Caballero. I look forward to reading and working on the bill.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Representative Alcon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But I can even hear myself echo. And I know why, but I can't figure out why I'm on there for 2 times. But I think the message that we're sending out should not be defund the police. We should be saying we want to assist the police. and over again, we hear that.
Representative Alcon,
Let me see if I can fix that problem.
do you have the phone on? Is that why? Because you are on this.
I'm on there twice, and I can't figure out why.
Madam Chair.
So let me.
I think Aaron can help us.
With your permission, with Representative Alcon's permission, I can't expel one of those accounts. It will just possibly.
Yeah, if you can just kick me out of one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
You're still there.
I'm still there.
There we go.
Now I'm back to normal. I know I can barely stand one of me, so I know the rest of you can stand two of me. So anyway, but the message that I'm saying over and over again, we keep on hearing defund the police. I don't really think anybody wants to defund the police. Basically, what we want to do is find a way to assist the police, find a way to make their job easier so that they can do police work. And people like, caseworkers and mental health therapists and people like that are the ones that are out there doing, helping them out there so that they're not having to arrest people that don't need to go to jail. I mean, people that are having a mental breakdown or a drug problem, that need to go to emergency room should not have to be cuffed by the police. There should be somebody there that can help them out, and they can. So, where the word came in that we're defunding the police or that we want to defund the police came from, I don't know. It's supposed to be assist to make the policeman's job, policewoman's job easier. And I think if we can work on that, I think we can get a lot more people to work on this programs and everything that we should be working on. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Representative. Remember, if you want to, you need to check on the participants and then hit the raise hand thing if you've got your camera off, because then I can't see you if you want to ask a question. I wondered if, Mr. Baca, I wonder if you wanted to address the issue of the conflict that arises that Senator Cedillo Lopez brought up about why you don't go first to the preliminary hearing. Or is that something that you're prepared to address at this time?
Madam Chair, so if I understand you correctly, you'd like me to address the sort of prosecutorial discretion in taking something to a prelim versus using a grand jury?
Yes, thank you.
Got it. So, Madam Chair, I think Senator Cedillo Lopez has artfully put it, that there is some measure of discretion. When you look at the history of the role of prosecutors in the judicial system, the courts as well as the legislature, have historically viewed prosecutors as quasi-judicial in their function. So as a quasi-judicial officer, a prosecutor has obligations to the justice system itself. They have obligations to the defendant to ensure that justice is done, both in bringing a fair charge, but also fully analyzing a case to ensure that it does meet the standards and criteria necessary to move forward. And so I think that's the beginning of the beginning of the decision-making process there. With respect to the avenues for then bringing a prosecution, I think that there is certainly a lot of very valid commentary about the use of a grand jury that is, by law, the proceedings of which are closed and confidential. Many of the reasons for that are to protect the rights of the accused, of course, and versus having a preliminary hearing. For some prosecutors, that will pose some functional challenges as well. A preliminary hearing, while obviously a lower standard of proof, is effectively, it's kind of a mini trial depending on the complexity of the case. And so the amount of work and time that goes into presenting a case at a prelim versus at a grand jury can oftentimes be significant. But I think from our office's perspective, we definitely share the concerns. I think the themes that you hear mostly in this conversation are about timeliness and transparency. And so certainly those cases that are going to a prelim, that are open to the public, are going to afford those extra, at the very minimum, extra instances of transparency, because a member of the public or the media or whomever can actually view the proceedings. So, I think globally our perspective is that we're very interested in continuing to work with the senator on improving these processes so that ultimately, again, we impact those two variables, which are timing and transparency to the public. How we get there, I think, there are a lot of ways to look at it and to look at how to get the existing tools of the justice system to function the way that they're supposed to. But we also obviously respect the public sentiment of not always trusting that those tools are working the way that they're supposed to do. So however the state can approach this issue in a way that allows the justice system to do its work, but do it in a way that increases community trust and transparency is definitely a concern for us. Not quite sure if that answered all of your question, Madam Chair. But
thank you, Mr. Baca. I do. I have a couple of questions or comments. I wanted to recognize again Ms. Maestas. I think she wanted to address one of the issues, and Erin's going to make sure that she can speak at this time.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I forgot to add in another area that we would like to see changed or some more accountability in regards to this area. So learning on the day of my sister's funeral that the deputies were back to work was really hard for us. I mean, it was only a week after the shooting. We still don't know if any of the deputies received any kind of discipline or retraining or anything like that. Instead, to my shock, I found that one of the deputies was given a promotion 2 weeks after the shooting. Well, we still have all these questions. We're still going through this whole process. So I was really devastated by that. One of the things is that there's this open door for inconsistencies within the process of APD, state police, every department in our state. They all operate differently. So you can have a shooting take place with state police, and this is just an example. And let's just say the officer is immediately given discipline, retrained, all the steps are followed. But then you can have that same shooting take place within BCSO or APD, and again, this is just an example. Nothing is given. The officers back to work. Everything's dandy, and I would just really love to see a more streamlined process when it comes to that area, more consistency. I mean, I can only come with suggestions and suggest that possibly the Attorney General's office be the one to release the officers or deputies only after steps followed in a thorough investigation, because that adds like a huge weight to the family, additional heartache. I mean, one of the men who just shot my sister 21 times, 2 weeks later was given a promotion. I don't even know if this man was ever talked to by the sheriff to be retrained or given any kind of discipline. Instead, we were seeing, these officers pretty much by the sheriff being given, he didn't openly justify, but in a way justified their actions. And so I would really love to see that area changed. And then, and I don't want to take up too much time, but, I think there is all these mixed messages coming across the nation right now with police. And I am not against police, and I'm somebody that has been affected in such a way that I've lost somebody that I love dearly. But I could say that I'm not against them. In a way right now, I feel torn because I know that there needs to be these changes. And I feel like this should not be a us and them situation. This should be like a we situation. How do we as a community, including police and a community, come together and address these issues? Because there are issues. If there weren't, people would not be dying for no reason. Elisha was a member of the community. She had 2 jobs. She was a conservative Republican. She just got sick, and she got this tumor resulting in intracranial pressure that led to her psychosis and behavior. And unfortunately, the only option we were given as a family with her rapid change in behaviors is call 911, because they're the only ones that can take a loved one to the hospital. So I think people, when they say defund the police, they want change. They want to stop this pattern. It has to stop. Our loved ones are dying. I mean, it's just a heartbreaking situation all around for everybody involved. I'm sure the officers involved don't want to be put in this situation either. I'm pretty sure if they could, get better training, they would ask for it. I think a lot of this is because the leaders in the departments are failing their officers and their deputies. They're not putting the proper steps in place for transparency, and they're not holding them accountable for their bad behavior. And when you don't have transparency and accountability, you get this kind of behavior. And I'm going to just go ahead and stop myself, and thank you all for hearing me.
Ms. Maestas, I had wanted to thank you because there's no way that anything we do can restore your loss, but you can help us change public policy. And I know there have been other families that have found some measure of comfort in that, and we're really grateful to them for their advocacy. So I think that as you continue to work with us, that'll be good. So thank you very much for being here today. I just wanted to say that I too think that right now we leave not only the victim's family, but we leave the law enforcement in a no man's zone. You know, it's just not a good situation now. The district attorneys, I think, are in a bad situation. The family's in a bad situation. Other officers, when there's an officer who has conducted himself or herself in a way that's dangerous or illegal, other officers are tainted by that. So I do think this would be a very wise move on our part to at least begin to try to clarify the process. And I really like the senator's idea that the family is notified, the public is notified regularly as to the status of the investigation. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we're ready to move to the next item, but we've been joined by a number of other folks, and we certainly have a quorum at this point. I wanted to have you all say hello, if you would. Let's see, Senator Cervantes, my co-chair. You want to say hello this morning?
Hello, did I make it? Did I get it right? No.
Yeah, we tried to talk to you earlier, and I don't think you heard us. But
hi, everyone. Yeah, it was kind of strange. I think I have this all figured out. The problem is that when I go from WebEx to Zoom to all these different platforms, none of them have the same buttons, exactly, and procedures, and I've got to keep it all straight. So anyway, I was listening in. I followed you, but I couldn't. Get myself completely attached. But good morning, everyone. Thank you.
Great to have you here. We've also been joined by Senator Lopez. Would you like to say hello?
Okay. I don't know if I can get the video going either. Oh, there you are. Good morning, everybody. And I look forward to the discussion today. And we have a lot of good work to do this coming legislative session. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Georgine Lewis.
Hi, Madam Chair. I'm also trying to start my video, but oh, there we go. So it's good to be here today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce myself, and I look forward to the discussions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Christine Trujillo. There you go. You're unmuted now.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I kept pressing the button and it wouldn't let me speak. I'm Christine Trujillo out of House District 25. It's good to see you all.
And I'm happy to say we're joined this morning by our House Majority Leader, Representative William Stapleton. She's going to be presenting a little bit later this morning. Representative, would you like to say hello? Well, she unmuted for a moment there. We'll get you in a moment, Representative Stapleton. Okay, great. Is there anyone I've missed? Wasn't here earlier. Okay, the next item is actually, and I'm expecting Representative Hochman-Vigil to be joining us for this particular item because she and I had a memorial on law enforcement training. Senator Cedillo Lopez had it on the Senate side. And at our last meeting, we had the chief of the Farmington Police Department who spoke to us about police training and in a different context. And so we invited him back this morning to join us on this. We also have Sheila Lewis, who's the director of Santa Fe Safe. So she is here for this particular presentation. She raised the issue with me initially. And I see Representative Hochman-Vigil is here. So I'm not sure who would like to go first. I'm not going to do that. I'm here to chair the meeting, and I'm not going to talk about the content just yet. Representative Hochman-Vigil, are you ready to begin, or would you like to have a different order of things?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize. I'm having trouble getting my camera to work, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to be on the camera, but I am here. I'm happy to kick things off if you want just a general overview of the memorial. So the impetus of this memorial came about after the numerous incidents we had seen of police-involved shootings throughout the country right before we went into the special session. And it begged the question of, what are our current police training requirements for de-escalation practices? Because in a lot of the police-involved shootings that we've seen throughout the country and also in New Mexico, they have come about because of an escalation, either between the police officer and the person being detained, or the person being detained and others, which led to an escalation in the situation, which then eventually led to the discharge of a weapon or even the taking of the life. So we got together and we started asking the questions of what are our police officers trained to do in these types of situations? Do they have any specific training in conflict de-escalation, in alternate dispute resolution principles and practices? And if not, how can we incorporate those that type of training into the police academy, or how our law enforcement is being trained, so that we can teach police officers to de-escalate as opposed to ramping up, which can ultimately lead to the loss of life. So that's how we got to this memorial. I'm happy to answer any additional questions on top of that if anybody has any.
If anyone would like to look at the text, the House Memorial was number 3. Senator Cedillo Lopez, do you remember the Senate Memorial number?
I believe it was 1.
Okay, great. So we have that there. And I think now I would like to go to Sheila Lewis.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I think the only thing it's important for me to say about this at this time is that the way the memorial is set up, it's an effort to bring people to the table together. So we do have very good information about the kinds of programs that help police officers get better at their job. There's something like 18,000 police departments in the country, so there's a lot of other examples out there, but the important thing is for the police department, the law enforcement agencies, and for the academy to hear what the people in the community have to say about what the problems have been. If you address those needs on the training level, that's a first step. Of course, the other part of the equation is training is training. It's a baseline. And what we want to make sure is that law enforcement training officers are on board with the training. And often the training officers, the field officers, are the older, more experienced, probably best, but sometimes most intractable. And it's very important that the process of assigning field officers to the young officers is done with a great deal of caution. So I think there should be a level of included in the training academy of what makes a good training officer. Because as we know, George Floyd, that was the problem. He was a training officer. He had officers there who were on the force for only 3 days. And that's an example of how it happens. So that's an important aspect for that group to look at. What does it take to be a good field training officer? Not just years on the force, but actually the right mindset for training. So I hope that this is enacted. I think it's a great idea because more than anything right now, we need reconciliation, and bringing in people from the community who have had lived experience is going to make a real difference. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lewis. And I think that I'll be interested to hear what our other members have to say. I know Representative Ream was a member of law enforcement for many years. He's a retired law enforcement officer. And he has described to us, and I think most members of the committee who have served in years past have heard him talk about how not the initial training, but the recertification is somewhat perfunctory and burdensome. And it really sounds like it's not that useful to the officers. And it seems that it doesn't change from year to year. The legislature adds requirements, and then it just makes it perhaps more burdensome and less useful from what I hear. So I hope we can look to also not just the initial training, but the in-service training. Chief Hebe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to tell you that I just passed the most stressful part of my day. and that was making sure I could actually log in, that I could get my camera working, and I could get my mic working. I've been up all night worried about it, but we were able to make it happen, so that's a win today. I agree with what you were just describing from Mr. Ream, that our training regimen has been the same since I got here for 6.5 years, that we're training our officers repeatedly in things like how to respond to Amber Alerts or how to initiate an Amber Alert. Frankly, that's not even an officer's responsibility. It's a supervisor's responsibility. So, I've been an advocate of we should be revamping our biennial training. One of the things we should be focusing on is more communication skills, things like CIT training, things like de-escalation training. Those things aren't on there. While we continue to talk about things that we put in place maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, if anything, all we wind up doing is adding more responsibilities to the training. I would start off with this point, I guess. We've talked a little bit in the last day or two. We did a story about the Law Enforcement Training Academy. Just the last several months. How things are going at the training academy, the amount of resources we're devoting to the training academy, and who we're getting to work down there should be a much greater focus than what we've got right now. So I know our department had hired someone who was actually a trainer down in Santa Fe, and he couldn't get operation with us. He couldn't do the job. So who are we getting to do the training initially when people are coming in, as well as the biennial trainings, is of math. What is complex because restrictions on people retiring and rehiring. Really, we should have that as an option, that we could retire who've been good proven trainers for us in New Mexico for 20 years, and now they're going to come back and they're going to teach the next generation. That would be a great first start. If we can't make that happen, then we should be looking at other creative outside of the box ideas. Like what we do in San Juan County is FPD right now has the director position is coming from our department, but the academy compensates FPD for that position, for the pay. So if the state developed a fund and they came up to us and they said, Chief, we'd like you to send down one of your best trainers for a year to train for us at the academy, and we will pay the salary so that it isn't a burden on each individual agency. We will take it as the state, but we want good trainers. Right now, I can't tell you. I think we'd have to talk with the director. I can't tell you where they're getting trainers or how good those trainers are. But like we were just talking about with field training officers, if your lead trainers are not the best, brightest, you're a bad start already in changing police culture. And so how we're getting people to train and who's doing that training is of critical importance right from the start. And I also agree with, I think it was Ms. Lewis, that we should be looking at our FTOs. We can have further conversations on that. I do have some thoughts on that, but I'll use this for my opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Heavy. Let me see if we have anyone on the list. I don't see hands raised here. Anybody want to raise a hand and let me know visually? Senator Cedillo Lopez.
Thank you,
yes,
ma'am.
go ahead.
Thank you.
You're really one of the presenters anyway, so you shouldn't have to raise your hand. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say I was delighted to bring a version into the Senate for the special session strategic to see which we could get across the line. And unfortunately, it was so hard to get anything across the line that wasn't just directly related to the budget. But I think that the most important thing about this kind of memorial is something that has already begun, and that is more conversations between the police officers, the trainers, and the community. Because that, as I said, my father was an undersheriff in Valencia County, and it's very, very important, I believe, for the police to not see the community as the enemy, but to see themselves as part of the community. And I think that this bill would get people involved, talking to each other and talking about what's appropriate in training, particularly the idea of de-escalation. Just relating to the last bill, I just don't understand how a short 5'2" woman could end up with 21 bullets in her body. after a call. And so I don't understand what happened. We won't know because there were no lapel cameras. And so this is there are many, many steps that we need to take to heal and to get people communicating. And this is one of them, is to get people in the same room talking about what police officers need to actually be effective community members and to engage in community policing. And I really appreciate Officer Heavy's points about, you can get stuck in a training rut. And I think you always need to refresh the training, make sure that you're understanding what's going on in the community today. So thank you very much and for allowing me the opportunity to present the memorial. And if we can, whatever we can do to support that kind of moving forward, I think will really help. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And, I wondered if, because this hadn't occurred to me because I really don't know that much about the actual training at the academy, but Chief Heavy, if you could give us some kind of an idea how many trainers are there annually, and would they take the trainer from each department? I don't mean each department, but from the departments selected, would they ask folks from various parts of the state so that you have someone from the Southeast and the Northwest and so forth? And it's not just the Rio Grande corridor, and get trainers. And would 1 year be enough? And would you sort of stagger them so that maybe they would spend 2 years and then go back to their departments, and you would continue to refresh your bank of trainers? So if you wouldn't mind answering that, then I'm going to go to the other committee members.
Yes. So, that's just my latest idea. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. I don't know really what the academy's full needs are. You'd have to talk with Director Al-Zahara, but I know that they're working hard for them. I notice this come across regularly that they're looking for trainers to come down. Under my idea, you could do a 2 year, but 2 years away for a department to give up a person for 2 years is asking a lot. Probably they could do it for a year, and I would be interested in doing it for a year. I think that there'd be all sorts of benefits to the employee that we sent down there, the chance to mix with others across the state. But there'd be limitations to it too. You're right. After a year, they're probably just getting themselves settled a little bit. However, it would give the state the chance to have the best trainers from across the state come in at no cost to the local agencies beyond the loss of that employee themselves. But that, for the overall improving our training as a state, I think that's a small price to pay. And although we regularly send employees down for training at Santa Fe, we have our own academy up in San Juan County, I would be interested in sending people down to support that mission under those guidelines. So, if we couldn't get the retire and rehire, and you could bring back folks that have experience in it but are at the end of their career, which I still think would be our best option, but I understand the political problem with it. I think you could do this, and I think we could make this work, and it would improve things for the director and improve the quality of training that we're giving.
Thank you so much. Representative Maestas, you have questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chief, for joining us, and Senator representatives. The first bill I ever did back in the day dealt with this statute of police training, and we put in statute that upon an arrest, the officer has to ask the person, "Hey, do you have any minor kids at home we need to know about?" It was before we sang on the House floor, so that ends that. But anyway, it's a neat statute. We've visited the statute maybe every 3-4 years. I believe, Madam Chair, the statute was before your committee about 3-4 years ago, in which the Law Enforcement Academy wanted to delete everything that we had put in statutorily and essentially not have any statutory requirements under the onus that they would do what we wanted them to do, but they felt confined by the statute. And we said, well, how are you confined by the statute? And they said, well, we've been watching the same video for an hour for the past 10 years, and we don't want to watch that video anymore. Or it was it was something to that effect. So the Law Enforcement Academy, it has new leadership. An officer from Alaska was hired, and the Law Enforcement Academy trains officers that their own agency isn't big enough to have an academy. And so, Chief, or maybe Senator Avisoto, which I know Albuquerque, Cruces, Santa Fe have their own academies. How many academies are there? And then, of course, the rest of the officers from the smaller towns and smaller counties train at the Law Enforcement Academy. Could you refresh our memory, if anyone knows?
Madam Chair, if I may, I do know that the ones that you mentioned, also Bernalillo County has its own academy. The site that they use, whereas APD has their own facility, Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, when I used to teach in their academy classes, it was at the Department of Energy facility on Kirtland Air Force Base that they utilized for that. And then I think there is one of the issues that comes up for a lot of the rural places, and Chief, you may be able to comment on this if you're aware of this issue, is that when a person goes to the state police academy, if they're from one of the smaller jurisdictions, they're paid. They're on salary while they go to the academy. And so one of the problems that a lot of the smaller jurisdictions have, particularly on the eastern side of the state, is that they end up paying for somebody to go through the academy to get certified. And then they get poached. If not by somebody else in New Mexico, they get poached by somebody in West Texas. And at that point, they are out the money that they spent training this person. And so if we are going to be revisiting this statute, I know this is an aside from use of force, except that it goes to the issue of having people who are consistently trained and in New Mexico and where we are able to maintain those people, is that it's something we may want to consider as to whether or not we have the salary during the police academy that there be a lien or something on that salary until the person completes, 3 to 5 years with the agency that paid for them to go get the training, right? So that then if somebody wants to hire them away, they'd have to basically reimburse that law enforcement agency. I know that Tobacco County has had a huge problem with this. Curry County's had a problem with this, Roosevelt County. And so Lee County and Hobbs are able to pay enough that they keep people from going to Texas. But in the smaller jurisdictions, this is a real issue. And so then what happens is we end up getting this repeat, these people who kind of come through, they don't have all the training yet, or they're very early in their career, and then very quickly they're off to someplace else. And so then you don't end up with the wisdom that comes from somebody who's been on the street for a while, who is able to recognize what they're dealing with a little bit better than some of the rookies are. Chief, I don't know if you want to comment on that as well, but I do think that that's an issue.
I agree with you, sir. New Mexico is mostly smaller departments that populate, in particular, the south end of the state, and that is a challenge. Getting poached by bigger departments, even in New Mexico, is a problem for them. We've seen that where that's actually been the policy of some of the departments at various times to try and make up for their staffing shortfalls by saying they're going to hire cops from across the state, from other departments. For us, I think as chiefs, you're trying to balance. You've got to get people in there. You've got to get people trained. You're not paying as much as some other departments are, but you've got to get people to the academy. You're right, though. When they get there, they're exposed to all sorts of other departments, and they can be poached by other departments, at least in New Mexico. I guess I'm not as aware up here close to Colorado. We're not losing cops much into Colorado, but they could be into Texas. I'm not really aware of that as well. But it is a concern.
No, thank you for that, Chief. Thank you, Senator. So the point I want to make is even though some of these larger agencies have their own police academies, the culture, in my opinion, the culture of policing stems from the Law Enforcement Academy in Santa Fe, which is under the Department of Public Safety. And so it's important that they're up to the most modern techniques in policing. As I was mentioning about APD, in the settlement agreement, there's language with regards to training, use of force, procedures after use of force is used, categorizing levels of use of force. And this was done by the Department of Justice, by the top cops in the country, utilizing modern language to train officers. So that may be something we should consider. There was some resistance, but I think ultimately the officers are happy to be, they just want to be told how to do it, and with the best training, we could have the best officers. When these bills come in January, February, we're going to hear, I predict, that if this bill passes, cops won't want to be cops anymore. I disagree. I think more New Mexicans will want to be cops. I think the less bad experiences people have with cops, particularly young males, men of color in their teenage years, they'll want to be cops. And I think that the more New Mexicans, men and women who become officers in New Mexico, I think the better policing we'll have, and the closer to the community those agencies will be. So anyway, thank you, Chief, very much. Good to see you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
And Madam Chair, if I could just comment on something that Representative Mastis just brought up, and that is the culture difference that he was talking about. One of the idiosyncrasies that we have in New Mexico, because the larger law enforcement agencies have their own academies, and they create their own culture in the academies. And in fact, a lot of us can point back to, I think it was Chief Gil Gallegos in Albuquerque, which is when they changed the culture in the APD Academy, which has had some very disastrous impacts over the couple generations of people who came after that. So one of the things that I think is we need to be aware of, and we may want to do something about, is that all of law enforcement ultimately is responsive for their licensure to the Law Enforcement Academy Board. So what you have is the Law Enforcement Academy Board, on the one hand, setting the curriculum for the state academy, setting the culture for the state academy, and then holding people accountable to that. But then you have the larger agencies who do their own training, they do their own culture, but they're responsible to the Law Enforcement Academy. And so what are the things actually, if we really want to attack this issue along the lines of what Senator Cedillo-Lopez was talking about, is we may want to standardize things a little bit more. And if someone's running their own academy, they have to do so. I mean, they have to be accredited through Law Enforcement Academy, but have a tighter relationship there, more accountability, and maybe even have instructors that are authorized through the Law Enforcement Academy, so that we keep the same culture of law enforcement throughout the state, not only in the training, but in the accountability. Thank you. And I see that the chief had his hand up as well.
Right, and I do have someone else on the list, but let me see if Chief Hebe wants to address that question, Senator.
So I agree conceptually with what Mr. Ivy-Soto was just saying, except I would tell you it goes back to what my opening statement was. Who are we getting to do the training down in the training academy? That helps set culture. It's not just what the academy board sets as policy. That's one thing. Then you've got to train those things. When I first came down here as chief, already coming from Anchorage, a bigger department, we were aware of the pressure coming from the Department of Justice. We were watching what was going on in Seattle and Portland and Spokane as far as consent decrees. So we already had a pretty good concept on the culture we needed to change. And I first came down to Farmington, and we had officers down at the training academy, and they came back, and honestly, over the next year and a half, we spent a lot of time trying to train them out of the things that they had learned in Santa Fe, and we've not sent anybody back down to Santa Fe. We wind up there's not a big enough emphasis on de-escalation down there. They were some of our top use of force people that when they came back from Santa Fe, we had to train them into the San Juan County way. The very things that we're teaching already up in the academy in San Juan County. That goes to what I'm saying. Who is doing the training down there, and how much resources are we giving the director to accomplish that mission? Ideally, you're right. We could have culture set throughout our state if we have a good, vibrant training cadre down there in Santa Fe that is training the things we want to see as chiefs and as citizens in New Mexico. But when that's not happening, when we're scraping for instructors and we're just kind of hodgepodging along, honestly, I don't send officers down to Santa Fe. They train out with me. They're doing it the Farmington way. You're right. It's our own culture, but it's a culture where we focus on de-escalation. We focus on not using force if we don't need to. We're not as interested in the old school policing. We're interested in more communication, and that becomes the emphasis. So if we're gonna make culture out of the state academy, we've got to support the state academy far, far better than what we've been doing. Thank you, and I'm sorry to interrupt and take somebody's spot.
No, that's fine. I appreciate that. It was a good conversation. Senator Ryu.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Chief. Thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to be here. Delighted to have your perspective on all this. I've been ducking in and out of the meeting, unfortunately, but one thing I want to ask, and if you've addressed this, we can let it go. The issue with laterals, coming to New Mexico. I know in the past, I remember years ago, somebody had gone back and done some work on this and looked at some of these incidences, and there was a disproportionate number of these that were, the officers involved were lateral transfers. And I know we have special incentives for folks coming out of law enforcement, out of the military and other jurisdictions. So how do those folks come into New Mexico and end up on the street as far as patrol officers? What kind of a training, what kind of a transition is there to get them ready to work in New Mexico or these local jurisdictions in your experience?
Thank you, sir. I have to be a little cautious because I'm a lateral transfer from Alaska, right? So I'm not working on the street, but I am a lateral transfer from out of state. There isn't a big transition, which is one reason, of course, that departments are interested in hiring laterals, is they're already trained, and therefore they cost the department less money to have them come in. What they have to do is get certified, so they have to pass a certification test with the Law Enforcement Academy. And I believe now maybe there's a 3-week training class, but 3 weeks is really not enough to train them in whatever culture whatever culture that department or the state has. They're really coming with whatever culture they had back there. So the transformation to get them to be good New Mexico police officers, the way we want to see them, is not that easy. And I think we don't hire a lot of laterals from outside of the state. Maybe some of the bigger departments do. Maybe Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Bernalillo County. Farmington does not hire very many from outside. So I'm not sure how prevalent that problem is. And I haven't seen the study that you're referencing overall to know. But it is a concern. How are we going to get them to be New Mexico police officers, not from wherever they came from before?
Well, thank you, Chief. And, I think that's part and parcel of this whole discussion. I think I would love to see something more uniform and consistent throughout the state, where anybody coming into any law enforcement jurisdiction will have the same kind of training. And I understand there's some things perhaps that the laterals don't need to go through again, but there has to be that component in their training too, that brings them up to the same level as far as what we're trying to accomplish here in New Mexico, as far as the sensitivity of the culture realizations and the training. So anyway, that's a discussion I think we need to have. And in fact, I would ask perhaps if, Madam Chair, if we can get those numbers, if it's possible to cobble that together from all the various jurisdictions and agencies as far as the number of laterals that are coming into law enforcement in this state, because I think that needs to be addressed in the conversation. But again, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chief, very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. And next I have Representative Ream, who can address some of the questions that came up.
Madam Chair, thank you. Let's start off with the Academy. There's actually 2 different divisions. There's a basic academy, which deals with training brand new officers. And then there's an advanced section that deals with the advanced training, continuing ed, if you will. one of the biggest problems that has happened at the academy is they currently have about half the FTEs that they used to have. And so the staff is really spread thin, and they need more staff there. For a law enforcement officer to be an instructor, or even anyone to be an instructor there, you have to, if you're not teaching a class that the academy is certified as a proper curriculum, then you have to submit the curriculum and it has to be approved. Then you have to be a certified instructor to go ahead and teach that class and certified in that discipline. On the field training officers, I can just speak for our agency. One is the state required, if you're going to be a field training officer, you have to have field training officer training. And then the supervisor who oversees that program has to have the supervisory training, and that's required by the state. The officers that were selected for field training were our senior officers without, if you will, a history of internal affairs complaints. There are 10 academies throughout the state. The most recent one is CNM. And then Western University also has a section to train police officers. Otherwise, the remaining ones are at law enforcement agencies across the state. Many of the instructors that go up and teach at the Law Enforcement Academy are adjunct instructors. I'm one of them. If you remember a few years ago, we passed legislation that we couldn't have any no-bid contracts. So if I go up and teach the basic accident investigation, I have to do it for free. We talked about biannual training. Biannual training, so there's 40 hours of in-service, 20 hours is kept for the agency, and 20 hours is what you have brought up that has been mandated. It was supposed to be current trends that we could teach, but what has occurred is the legislature has mandated certain subject matters, and so it's stagnant. We need to change that. Then in that biannual training, they also have to have 40 hours of advanced training within that 2 years. Anyway, I hope that helps understand some of the stuff that's going on at the academy. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Are there further questions of committee members? Let me just look here. I don't see a hand raised electronically. Chief Hebe, go ahead.
Thank you. Since I'm not taking anybody's time, I wanted to comment on the representative's point. What he's talking about with FTOs is accurate. That's what most of us would dream. But I can tell you, there was a study done in Kansas City when I was up in Anchorage, and we were looking at the consent decrees and how do you change culture. That I was reading the study, and the study was from Kansas City PD a number of years back, and it said the top like 10% of people getting in trouble, of officers who were getting sustained complaints and getting disciplined, were also making up overwhelmingly their field training officers. So that is a problem right from the start. I saw it in my time in Anchorage as well. We had officers who some of them were burned out. Some of them, wanted to be a field training officer for a little while, but then we're getting burnt out doing it. We had so many people that we were training. So you wind up as a department, yes, ideally I have just my best and my brightest that are my field training officers, but when we're trying to fill 10 or 15 different vacancies, there's 3 officers that are the field trainers for every one. So each shift has one graves. So you've got 3 different FTOs for every one kid that's coming through. You need a lot of FTOs. So you wind up not being able to go down with just your best and your brightest. You wind up having to take people to be FTOs that are marginal at best. I agree, and I think it was one of the first people that was talking, was the importance of having good field training officers. That absolutely is the truth, but that is a struggle at times for departments, especially when they're going through major hiring buildups. I would think Anchorage or Albuquerque PD has seen that some, that when they're really doing a big push, sometimes their FTOs are helping them change their culture like they'd like. So that is a concern for every chief, and of course for all of us as we're talking about changing police culture.
Thank you very much, Chief. I wanted to invite everyone to look at House Memorial 3 and Senate Memorial 1. One of the things that we did, and it was just proposed by Ms. Lewis, is that we asked the School of Law to do it. And I know during the session, the special, or right before it, Senator Cedillo Lopez checked, and the dean said, you know, we would need some resources. We would need some help to do the kind of work you're asking us to do here. And I'm wondering if what our vehicle might be, because we work such limited time, and it does seem that it would be possible, you know, memorials don't get an appropriation with them, but do we need actually to have a bill to fund somebody to put this together, somebody, as some group? When you mentioned that CNM has a training program, that could possibly be a location for us to look at. I do think there are a lot of ideas that could be explored by the folks who are studying the effort. And one of the things that I understand is that in some states, the role of the centralized academy is to provide the very last level of training. And all of the candidates have to have at least an associate's degree in criminal justice. And what that does is it gives you a little bit more mature candidate who has, you know, advanced well beyond high school, and might be able to perhaps exercise even more mature judgment and be ready to be trained. And I don't know if that you know, is a possibility given the recruitment difficulties that we talked about. And Representative Mayes is raising the issue of we raise the salaries somewhere, that we train everybody up, and then folks get poached away. I think that's another issue that probably doesn't belong in our memorial, or perhaps a simple appropriations bill, but the fact that they ought to have to, the hiring entity should have to repay for the training at the very least. You know, we can't just train people to be then hired by our neighbors, and within the state and outside of the state as well. So I think we have some work to do on that. And I know Representative Hochman V. Hill, Senator Cedillo Lopez, and I would certainly be interested in your ideas as we move forward with this plan. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and begin with our 11 o'clock, just a few minutes early. And I'm told by Senator Lopez that the lead presenter there is our Majority Leader of the House, Representative Cheryl Williams Stapleton, and that Senator Lopez and Senator Cedillo Lopez will be accompanying her on that topic. So go ahead. You have the floor, Madam Leader.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Am I, hello?
I can hear you, but I be sure to stay close to your computer. Don't lean back or anything. You were fading in and out a little bit.
Okay, you can hear me now? Can you hear me now? You can? Okay, great. My understanding, Madam Chair, members of the committee, good morning. It's almost midday. Senator Lopez and Senator Cedillo Lopez and Senator Lopez are co-sponsors in the Senate with me and in the House in regards to this this drafted piece of legislation. However, Madam Chair, presenters in the presentation today includes Devante Watson for Watson Associates International, who would speak briefly about the Crown Act movement, and Asia Brooks, president of New Mexico Black Lawyers Association, who would speak briefly on statistics, case law, other states that have passed this piece of legislation. And Dr. Cheryl Felicia Means from the University of New Mexico will give a historical concept between the racial discrimination of hair. Madam Chair and members of the committee, this draft discussion is prohibiting the title relating to race and prohibiting the imposition of discipline, discrimination, of disparate treatment in schools based on the hair or cultural headdress of a student, defining terms in the Public School Code and the Human Rights Act. So my brief overview, Madam Chair and members of the committee, would take you to page 2 of the Act that talks about the new language is on line 3 to line 7. No local school board shall allow for the imposition of discipline, discrimination, or disparate treatment against a student based on the student's race or culture or because of the student's use of protective hairstyles or cultural hairdress. And then, Madam Chair and members of the committee, on page 4, the next new language in the Act is starting up 9H, section H, page 4, line 9. As used in this section, cultural headdresses includes bukas, head wraps, or other headdresses used as a part of an individual's personal cultural belief. Protective hairstyles include such hairstyles as braids, locks, twists, tight coils, or curls. Number 3, race includes traits historically associated with race, including hair texture, length of hair, protective hairstyles, or cultural headdresses. Madam Chair, on page 5 is the same language that was on page 2, which is line 4 to line 8, spoke of in terms and shall not allow for the imposition of discipline, discrimination, or desperate treatment against a student based on the student's race or culture or because of the student's use of protective hairstyles or cultural headdresses. And Madam Chair and members of the committee, I would leave to say that the other pages that we have any changes on is the same language that I have just read to you. And so with that in mind, I am going to turn it over to Madam Chair, Devante Watson from Watson Associates International to give a brief introduction of the Crown Act movement.
Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, and thank you for being here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman Cervantes, Chairwoman Chasey, members of the Courts, Corrections, and Justice Committee, and to my fellow New Mexicans. When the 1964 Civil Rights Act was signed into law, our country sided with the philosophy of the Civil Rights Movement that it was time to end the racial humiliation derived from the structural and social violences within our country. We now embark on this new era where the same racial violence has disguised itself into the fabrics of our country, such as exhibiting unconscious bias towards people that are different than self, and even into public policy and its relationship with people of color. For many in this country, including Black women, racism doesn't just stop at the color of skin, but also by the immutable textures, patterns, and stylings of hair. Since before the founding of our country, Black hair has been a hyper-politicized topic where Eurocentric features and characteristics were and continue to be used as yardsticks for beauty and attractiveness, while stigmatizing other ethnic hairstyles. In order to assimilate to these features, people of African descent must chemically alter or apply extreme heat to a distinctive part of their body, thereby removing an indicator of cultural identity. Today, African Americans are disproportionately burdened by workplace policies and practices in public spaces that target, single, or profile them out for having natural hairstyles. This means having hairstyles that include protective hairstyles like braids, locks, twists, tight coils, curls, cornrows, bantu knots, afros, weaves, wigs, and even head wraps. In a 2019 study conducted by the Joy Collective to identify the magnitude of racial discrimination based on hair, Black women were found to be 30% more likely to receive formal policies of appearance, including hair. Why, you may ask? Because natural hair is stigmatized and is 3.4 times more likely to be seen as an unprofessional look. Since a New Jersey high school wrestler was forced to cut off his locked hair in order to participate in a match in 2019, this issue of racial discrimination based on hair has propelled into a national conversation. In addition, many New Mexicans were startled by the action of a Cibola High School teacher who cut off the braid of an indigenous female student and remarked to her as, quote, being a bloody Indian. For these two students and countless others who have encountered discrimination based on hair, this inflicts potentially traumatic events that can develop into adverse childhood experiences. There is currently a growing number of states that are engaging in the process to create a respectful and open world for natural hair by passing the Crown Act. First passed in the state of California, the Crown Act further defines the definition of race to include the cultural stylings of hair in public education, public accommodation, and housing, making it illegal to discriminate based upon hair. Passing the Crown Act in New Mexico will have far-reaching implications to protect our diverse communities from egregious acts of hatred and structural violence. In large, making this law in our great state of New Mexico would make it necessary to amend the New Mexico Human Rights Act. In closing, identity is inextricably linked to the relationship and presentation of hair. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before this committee, and I encourage you to learn more about how hair discrimination is racial discrimination. We appreciate all of the Black women who have stepped forward today to share on this important topic. This entire process has been a learning experience for us all, and we have learned that you can never have a big enough circle to pass the Crown, such as the Crown Coalition, to pass and suggest the Crown Act in New Mexico. Thank you, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next speaker would be Dr. Cheryl Felicia Means from the University of Mexico over the historical concept between racial discrimination of hair.
Good morning, all. I will do my best to be brief with my statement. Hair has always been integral to the racial and social caste understanding of Afro-descended women. Just as the theory of intersectionality developed out of a legal need to understand Black womanhood is a source of prejudicial, sexist, and racist behavior against Afro-descended women in the workforce, I will demonstrate historically hair has also played a crucial role in the subordination of Afro-descended women. On the African continent, prior to European colonization, women wore combs and other adornments in their hair, wrapped their hair in fabric, and braided their hair. The appearance of hair was a signifier for social rank, marital status, wealth, and familial or tribal membership and place of origin. This means hair has never been a superficial marker of beauty alone for Afro-descended women, but a way for them to situate themselves socially and politically. At some of the earliest encounters of 15th and 16th century Europeans with the African continent, there is a particular kind of language employed to describe and name Afro-descended women. This includes innumerate negative turned pejorative references to the physical features of these women, most pointedly their hair. It was not until African women were brought to the shores of the Americas that their hair became a joint signifier for a new concept, race, especially when paired with their skin. Slavery made the Black woman's hair ugly, as it made almost everything else about the Black race undesirable. To begin the dehumanization of Black bodies, those who kidnapped and enslaved people from the African continent shaved all of the enslaved's heads, thereby severing the connection to the culture and identity of their homeland. The pride and elegance that once symbolized curly and kinky hair immediately became a badge of racial inferiority. Owners of plantations also employed head shaving as a punishment, particularly in the case of wives of wealthy landowners shaving the heads of their husbands' unclaimed children to hide their shame. Black people of lighter complexion were generally biracial, and with that came a texture of hair more closely aligned and more easily shaped to the hairstyles worn by white women and considered acceptable in white society. As a result, mixed-race slaves not only were assigned less grueling, though not necessarily less cruel, jobs in closer proximity to white persons, but could more easily pass as free and held higher status than free, non-mixed Black women. For these reasons, Black women sought to straighten and contort their hair to approximate white women's hair. Readily, stereotypes surrounding the hair of Afro-descended people emerged, since to have Black hair was to have slave hair, and to have slave hair was to be subhuman. The traditions that could have followed Afro-descended women from the continent were rendered impossible, since they didn't have the combs or the time necessary to care for their hair. As the creation of a white racial caste in the United States positioned all Euro-descended people as racially superior to Afro-descended people, and notions of femininity were aligned with the creation of whiteness, hair became the most telling feature of Negro status, more than the color of skin. The concept of race globally linked the Black body to ideas about high levels of sexuality, depravity, laziness, and violence that needed to be controlled. This need for control spilled over into the workplace easily when Afro-descended women sought to minimize attention to themselves, assimilate to accepted beauty standards, and avoid the stereotypes stemming from slavery concerning their hair and bodies. Afro-descended women have been straightening their hair for almost as long as slavery has legally been over. The products first created to facilitate straight hair were marketed in terms of cleanliness and loveliness, which in turn seemed to emphasize the underlying mirrored view that Black people were unclean, unkempt, uncivilized, ignorant, unintelligent, uneducated, and infantile. Hair on women from marginalized people groups is not just a representation of personal identity, but a socio-political assertion of agency and personhood. To have that identity denied at school and in the workplace through codified language like presentable appearance is to hearken to the same language that has historically discredited Afro-descended women and other racialized people groups in the United States, juxtaposed against those deemed socially acceptable through the lens of whiteness. Hair has always played a critical role in racial discrimination. The Crown Act is one step toward an end to the ius non scriptum of customary law that has dictated notions of professionalisms in the United States for more than 300 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I yield my time.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, our next speaker will be Asia Brooks, President of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association. On the statistics and case law, other states that has passed the legislation.
And Representative William Stapleton, thank you. I am not sure if you already knew this, but we do have another speaker on the line. Her name is Malia Luarke. She's from Indigenous Women Rising. I don't think we knew that she was confirmed until today, but she is here on the line. So I'm hoping that she can speak and then I can speak after her if that's okay.
Okay. In that case, is she on now?
She is on now.
Okay.
Here. Can you guys hear me? I don't know if anyone can hear me. Okay. How is everyone this morning? I'm hoping everyone is well and in good spirits. I want to thank you all for this opportunity to speak. Like AJ said, I believe, I'm sorry if I got your name incorrect, but my name is Malia Luarke. I'm with Indigenous Women Rising. I grew up on the Laguna Reservation, and as a child, I was constantly teased and disrespected because of the way I looked. Because of the way my family members looked. My father, for example, Richard Luarke, who was the governor of Laguna for 2 terms, I was constantly, again, teased and disrespected, made fun of. I grew up with a lot of Native and Indigenous kids who solely are only Native and Indigenous, and unlike myself, I'm Indigenous and Black. And so I would go to school, have not only my fellow classmates make fun of me because my hair was curlier or it just laid a different way when I had it in a ponytail or whatever the case may be. But it was also to their parents, the other family members, teachers. I had a teacher in elementary school tell me that I resembled an animal because of how big my hair was. And from that day on, I straightened my hair because I was so ashamed of who I was, what I looked like, and the people that I was growing up around. I thought it was unnormal to have the curly hair that I did because I was one of the only ones. And my siblings don't have curly hair. So I was the lucky one of the bunch to receive all the luscious curls. And I was so embarrassed and ungrateful at the time for what I was given. And I thought as a child growing up, as I got older, I would learn to love my hair and that it would stop. The discrimination because of my hair and what I look like would stop. And then I come to find out that that's not the case. As a young professional, I love to look my best and feel my best. But it wasn't until I started getting into work, school, that the discrimination doesn't stop. Whether it's here in New Mexico or if I'm going on travel for work. And it's very unfortunate that it's come to the point that because of my hair, I would not only be kept from opportunities that could potentially take care of myself and my family, but be perceived as unprofessional and unfit for any type of job description or any type of opportunity. And as it comes to this day, it's very, very disheartening to know that if I one day decide to have children, that this could also happen to them. And I have younger cousins, I have family members who also have mixed and Indigenous children who are experiencing anti-Blackness on traditional land or Indigenous land, and here in the city. And as we live here in such a diverse state, it's very, very disheartening to see that we are still experiencing things like this. And hopefully it comes to a stop. But thank you again for allowing me to speak, and I yield my time.
The Black Lawyers Association. Thank you, Malia.
Thank you, Representative William Stapleton. Good morning, members of the Courts, Corrections, and Justice Committee. So, the Crown Act, creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. That's what the acronym stands for. First, I want to just say, why are we having this conversation? Is hair discrimination against Black women really an issue? Devontae gave you a statistic, but I'm going to give you a few more. African American women are twice as likely to experience social pressure at work to straighten their hair compared to white women. Black women are 50% more likely to report being sent home or know of a Black woman who was sent home from the workplace because of her hair. So why is this the case? As you heard from Dr. Means, much of this discrimination is rooted in history and Eurocentric standards of beauty. And it's not surprising that for more than 40 years, there have been court cases also about this issue. In one of the more recent cases, one from 2013, which was actually the case that inspired the Crown Act movement, it was the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission versus Catastrophe Management Solutions. This was a situation in which an African American woman's job offer was rescinded after she refused to cut off her dreadlocks at the employer's request. The employer had already offered her the job, and they called her in and notified her that their grooming policy prohibited what they called excessive hairstyles. And so the dreadlocks were not in the policy, but excessive hairstyles were. And they informed her that they interpreted that to include dreadlocks was an excessive hairstyle. And this is just a part of the language that is actually working against Black women and their hair. When you say things like an excessive hairstyle, that's something that deviates from the European standard of beauty. There have also been other areas outside of the workplace, like in schools, where discrimination against Black women and Black people's hair has survived. You know, and there are many descriptions that you can read in these court cases, in these policies, where the description is unkempt or messy. So some of the cases that we see in the school area, for instance, in Massachusetts, where there were twin sisters, Deanna and Maya Cook, who were given detention and kicked off of their sports teams for having braids. And the school said that their hair was distracting. You know, and you see this extended, like I said, to other people besides Black women. So you can see this when we look at Black men as well. Devontae mentioned the New Jersey incident, which some of you have probably seen the YouTube video of it, where the high school wrestler Andrew Johnson was forced to either cut off his dreadlocks or forfeit the championship wrestling match. And if you know high school students, you know that that match was probably the culmination of so much work in this young man's life. So he does cut them off in the video, and it's just a very, very sad thing to watch. But the referee, he had already passed 2 different sets of review for his hair, and no one had said anything. But once he was in the middle of the match, the referee called his hair unnatural. So you see these Eurocentric standards of beauty being applied to Black people's actual natural hair that's growing out of their head. So why do we need this in New Mexico? You listen to Ms. Luarke's experience. And I can tell you that hair discrimination for people of color in New Mexico is real. You know, we talk in our organizations, we talk when we see each other, and I can tell you that there are true negative perceptions of Black people and of people of color based on their hair's deviation from Eurocentric standards of beauty. You know, I've had situations where people have said that I'm intimidating. If you know me, I'm the least intimidating person ever. But just because they said, well, you know, you have this Black power afro and, you know, you just seem very intimidating. And, you know, so those are things that you encounter every day. You know, and also Devontae mentioned the Cibola High School incident. You know, we understand that this is, although this act was created for and by Black women in order to center the ability not to discriminate against our hair, we know that here in New Mexico that extends to others as well. And so, you know, that's what happened in the 2018 incident at Cibola High School. So really, it is time for a change. That's why we're talking about this. 7 other states have passed the Crown Act: California, New York, New Jersey, Colorado, Washington, Virginia, and Maryland's act takes effect on October 1st. And we know that this is something that is needed and that is happening all around our nation. Even the Army and the Air Force have approved braids of increased size. They've included twists for female soldiers and have removed words such as unkempt from their grooming guidelines. And like I said, our bill for New Mexico is very inclusive of our Indigenous brothers and sisters, also those who use burqas, head wraps, or other headdresses as part of their personal cultural beliefs. We wanted to make sure that those voices were also present in our bill here in New Mexico. And so I just want to say thank you, and I yield my time if there's any left.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, we're now going to turn to the 2 senators that are sponsoring the bill in the Senate, my senator, Antoinette Sedillo Lopez, and then Senator Lopez.
Thank you so much, my representative. I've sponsored this bill, and I just really want to thank the leadership of the Black women and the Black men who have been, and the Native women, the Native men who are really bringing this to light and bringing this to our attention as a problem. I think that it's very important. I remember reading the case about the young Native person whose hair was cut. And cutting hair in Native culture is a cultural act. And so to see that happen in the schools was very disturbing. So I just want to honor the women and the men who have brought this forward and stand ready for questions. I really want to honor their inclusiveness to include all of the cultures in New Mexico so that we can ensure that this kind of discrimination and disparate treatment doesn't happen to our children and to adults in the workplace and in the schools. So thank you.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Majority Floor Leader and Senator. You know, kind of saying ditto for what Senator Antoinette Sedillo Lopez just said. You know, we've had some incidents with our Native American students in our school systems, and not just here in the Albuquerque public schools. I've had some at Rio Grande High School, but also in other communities across our state. I know that there are many of our African American children who have, and continuously, you know, from stories that we've heard during our team discussions in the drafting of this legislation that's currently going on. This has to stop. And this is an opportunity, I believe, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for us to educate ourselves, to understand what is really happening, and it has to stop. And I believe this is our venue and our way to go forward so that we have something that's written, passing both chambers, signed by the governor, that becomes law, that we can now hold some person's feet to the fire to make sure that this does not happen anymore. It's a discrimination that needs to stop. Thank you very much, and I look forward here to the discussion also. And again, thank you, Majority Floor Leader Stapleton.
Thank you, members of our African American community and senators. Madam Chair, before we go to questions, briefly, I just want to make one statement. As having been in the classroom teaching, what I have observed mostly with students who are of mixed race, whether they're Hispanic and Black or Black and Native American or white Anglo students mixed with Black race, they are being teased horribly because of their hair. And then when they try to do something with their hair, then you have many of our individuals who do not understand our culture and do not understand why our children may have worn their hair a certain way, without intentionally probably being discriminating. The words they say to those children are so hurtful. They're actually discriminating words. And so, Madam Chair, members of the committee, we now stand for questions.
Thank you very much. And I do have someone on the list, but before we go to the questions, can you tell me again, and I should have written it down the first time, the acronym CROWN stands for exactly what words?
This is Asia. It stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair.
Thank you so much. Asia was in my law school class, so I'm really happy to have you here today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And our first question is from Representative Karen Bash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is a quick question. Does this law also protect women and girls wearing hijab? Muslim women and girls.
I think my understanding, and we can certainly add that to specifics, but what we did was we wanted to put including but not limited to, but I was told that if you use including, you don't have to add but limited to, because that stands alone. So if you notice that the wording of the statute says including, and therefore that kind of discrimination would be covered by this act, but it's always better to add it. So that I think that the suggestion to add it would be a wise one, and I'll certainly raise that with the drafting team.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair and Representative Bash, in the language which we have cultural hairdressers, it includes head wraps. So would that apply? I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
No. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That you're finished, Representative? Let me see if I have any other questions. Okay, I don't have any on the official list. If you want to raise your hand or signal me if you have a question.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you all for bringing this. You know, I during the presentation, you know, my law practice is primarily focused on education, and my law partner popped in for a second, and he said, "What are you guys talking about?" And I told him, and he just looked at me and says, "Why do we have to have a law to tell people to stay away from other people's hair? That's like, we shouldn't have to do this." And so, I mean, I recognize we may have to do this, but we shouldn't have to do this. And so it's in that regard, it's a real frustration. I do have a couple comments on the bill itself, as you guys are planning to move forward on it. So you at this point in the bill are amending the public school code as it relates to districts, amending the public school code as it relates to charter schools, and then amending the Human Rights Act as it relates to the definitions within the Human Rights Act. And so just if I could just make a couple of observations on that. With regard to Section 1 of the bill, where you're amending 22-5-4.3, so the first sentence of subsection A deals with the local school board establishing policies. The insert that you have on the draft bill that's online, it starts off, no local school board shall allow for the imposition of discipline, discrimination, disparate treatment against student, yada, yada, yada. Now, the school board doesn't impose discipline. That would be a violation of the separation of powers that we have with regard to what a school board does and what central administration does, and then on down to the schools. They can do policies. And so just be aware of that. Then you have the structure is a little bit different, where you're amending 22-8B-4, which is the Charter School Act, where you're saying that the charter school is subject to all federal state laws prohibiting discrimination and shall not allow for, specifically, and on this issue. And it seems to me, as I look at both Section 1 and Section 2, that if you're amending the Human Rights Act and that this is in the Human Rights Act, then I don't know that it's necessary to actually go into the public school code in Chapter 22 in those two places to make those amendments, because a school is providing public accommodation. And so I think simply putting it in the Human Rights Act probably gets you where you want to go. Although I notice within the Human Rights Act, you amend the definition section, which is 28-1-2, but you don't amend unlawful discriminatory practices as specified in 28-1-7. And so it seems to me that really to get to where you want to be on this, it actually would be like I said, I don't think you have to the schools are already covered by the State Human Rights Act, but would be then in addition to the definitions that you're providing, and I'm a little cautious about the definition of race being narrowed the way it is by the manner in which we're doing this, but it would be necessary to actually amend 28-1-7 so that. And then in 28-1-7, if you look at the structure of 28-1-7, you could specifically call out schools. In fact, you could specifically call out K-12 as well as higher education, public as well as private, right? So that because arguably right now a private school could so discriminate, but a public school, whether a district or charter school, could not, based on the structure of this bill. And I don't think that's the intent that we want in terms of doing this. And so and then just the very last thing is that as you look at the definitions within the Human Rights Act, most of them are pretty close to being alphabetical. Not all of them. We start off with person and then we go to employer. But then you have after undo, which is the of course, a U, right? Cultural headdress with a C, protective hairstyles with a P, and and race with an R. And so those actually you may want to move those up a little bit further, just on a feng shui bit. But nonetheless, that's really, I mean, given the apparent and unfortunate need for this, I want to make sure that we're being effective if we actually proceed with this, and that we don't narrow things to the point that we're actually opening the door some places, and that we don't run afoul of the separation of powers issues that exist within school districts between the school board and the administration. So, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's very helpful, particularly with regard to what you said about calling out the school districts. My question, or my concern, is without having it in the public school code, there's a different enforcement mechanism within the two. And I don't think that we want individuals to have to bring a human rights claim. We want them to also to be able to go to the PED and complain. And also we want the PED to review schools to make sure that they're complying with this policy. With regard to your comment about separation of powers, it is absolutely true that the school districts have the boards do policy, but non-discrimination is a policy. And so I think that, I mean, maybe the wording isn't correct, but I think it's very important that the school boards need to know that this is an important policy that they need to implement. And to ensure that it's implemented. So that I don't think it's the separation of powers, because we're not asking the school districts to implement discipline, we're asking them to ask the schools to ensure that there is no discrimination, no disparate impact. And the reason we included disparate impact and discrimination is things like the situation where a young man is not allowed to wrestle because of his hair. That's ridiculous. Or the situation where a young man's hair is cut. Those are just unacceptable, and that's why we included them in the public school arena. Again, to have another mechanism for parents and for young people to complain, and to ensure that they get it instead of having to go through the Human Rights Act. So I am happy to talk with you about this more offline, because I think that our approach is actually more effective. I'm totally open to, and I think the whole team would be open to the language, but I don't want to leave out a mechanism of enforcement, particularly in our schools and young people, that I think is very important. So I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking with you more about it online, perhaps to invite you to one of our team meetings about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be happy to join in. And let me just also say that at least within the Human Rights Act, there is an enforcement mechanism. There's not an enforcement mechanism when you violate a school district policy. And so that's actually one of the places where, again, it's about making sure that we're being effective as we proceed. Thank you. Understood. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the senator, Representative Stapleton or Senator Lopez? Need to unmute.
Madam Chair, sorry about that. Senator Cedillo Lopez gave a specific explanation. I was looking at the fact in the line 3 on page 2 where Senator Ivy Soto mentioned about the local school board, whether or not it would be the local school district, the term local school districts, but then Senator Cedillo Lopez mentioned that it's because of policy issues, it more has to come from the board. So Senator Ivy Soto, then you're in agreement that we should keep the word local school board?
Well, so if you want a policy from every school board, then you need to say that they should adopt a policy to do the following, as opposed to say they shall not permit. Because permit is within their purview. Policy is what they expect everybody else within their ecosystem to follow. And I'm certainly happy to cogitate over what Senator Cedillo Lopez commented about in terms of why to have it in the public school code. I still think the most effective place to put it is in fact in the Human Rights Act, and making sure that you also in the Human Rights Act specifically amend section 28-1-7, which is unlawful discriminatory practice, because right now you're providing definitions without providing a specific unlawful discriminatory practice. So there's no place for it to go. And then the last thing is, again, in terms of race, we're departing from the federal definition of race. And it's a much narrower definition, and it's one that we again, like some of it is duplicative from the other definitions, and so I would just be careful about that. And I know that what you guys have in there as the definition says including. However, there is case law in New Mexico that when you establish a standard and then you say including and you're specific, that very well could lead to an exclusion of other things that were not included along those lines.
I appreciate that. And so you would say including but not limited to, because the intention there is to broaden. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I
was going to say, I don't think that in statutory construction we don't do but not limited to. So I think that's probably something, maybe if Senator Ivy Soto is willing to work with your group, you guys could have that discussion and look at some of the case law.
Absolutely, because that's why I wanted but not limited to, but we were told by Legislative Counsel Service that that's not appropriate. So I very much look forward to the discussion and to make the language stronger.
And I guess, do we not have a definition of race in the Human Rights Act now?
And the intention is to broaden it. So it's unfortunate that it was read to narrow it, because that certainly wasn't the intention. So the language should definitely be clear that the intention is to broaden and not narrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, so in the Human Rights Act, we don't have a specific definition of race. The other thing that I will note is that in the two places of the public school code, but not in the Human Rights Act, the language to be added is race or culture. We also don't have a definition of culture in any of those, so that we end up with one definition that I think does narrow, and then another word that is provided without a definition.
Okay.
Madam Chair? This is Christine.
Yes, Representative Trujillo.
Yes, I've spoken very briefly to Representative and Majority Leader Stapleton, Senator Lopez, and Senator Cedillo Lopez about this bill. And I have asked Rachel to put it on the LESC agenda for further discussion. And what we can do is also ask the LESC analysts to also work on the language to make sure that it is inclusive of all the language that's necessary to make sure that no one is left out and that we don't have a law that becomes problematic. I think that Rachel can place some analysts to do some research on it as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. As we mentioned to the team when we were preparing, or when the team was preparing for this, is one of the goals here was to make the bill stronger and better and get it vetted before we introduce it. So I really appreciate Senator Ivy Soto taking the time to carefully read the bill and to make these suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the nerds out there, the legal theory is inclusio unius est exclusio alterius, which is to say that the inclusion of one thing is the exclusion of the other.
Which is what makes that protocol within Legislative Counsel's office problematic.
Sure.
And you get a brownie point for that.
I'm just showing off for my former law school professor.
Thank you very much, Senator Ivy Soto and Representative Trujillo. It sounds like we have some good eyes and minds on this bill. Representative Cheryl Williams Stapleton, Senator Cedillo Lopez, Senator Lopez, I really appreciate your panel of experts on this bill, and I hope that we can get this in prime form and through both houses and into law. Thank you very much for that today.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We appreciate your attention to this.
Thank you. So I want at this time to invite public comment. I'm going to check our attendee list. And Senator Ivy Soto, you got your questions asked, right? Okay, good. All right. Let me see here. Oops, I'm looking to see if Aaron has anybody who is in the attendee list who has indicated a wish to speak at this time.
Madam Chair, I'm just double checking registrations, but I believe the attendees at the moment are presenters.
Right. It looks like we don't have any other folks from the general public. Okay. All right. I wonder if we could take care of a couple of business items. First of all, Senator Ivy Soto has gotten to speak, so he probably doesn't need further introduction, but we have Senator Baca who joined us. Senator Baca, would you like to say hello? Is he still with us? Now I'm not seeing his name.
I think he logged in for per diem purposes, but walked away.
Oh, he's going to really appreciate that comment. Okay. Oh, Senator Baca, I see your name now. Would you like to introduce yourself? Not hearing from him. Okay. Members, we do have a quorum. We have nice attendance today. I'm wondering if anyone is willing to move to approve the minutes from our August 17th and 18th meeting.
Madam Chair, I so move.
Okay, we have a motion from Senator Lopez. I'll second that motion. Is there discussion? Is there any objection to the motion to approve the minutes of August 17th and 18th? You can just raise your hand. Okay. All right. Seeing none, the minutes are adopted. Thank you very much. So we have got a heavy agenda this afternoon, probably putting 2 days worth of meetings into one afternoon. So I would appreciate everybody being here right at 1 o'clock, ready to go with the Corrections Department. Thank you for a great morning, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.